Dad kicked me out after his wedding and tried to blame me for his problems. But Grandpa took my side, fired him from the business, and now I'm inheriting everything. Hi, so a little over a year ago, my mother eloped with her affair partner. She had been having an affair with somebody from her high school for almost 2 years, and finally, they decided to make a run for it. They almost got married, but my mother had a change of heart or something, and she decided to do it the right way. So after being gone for almost 2 weeks, she decided to come back with divorce papers, and my parents got officially divorced. She didn't want custody of me, which was surprising because my parents don't get along with each other, but more than that, they don't get along with me. Anyway, she cut off all ties with everyone and relocated to someplace in Europe with her husband, her partner. And that was good for them, but not so good for me because that left me with no other option but to continue living with my dad. And after my mother left, he was even worse than before. He used to hate me earlier, but after my mother left, he started loathing me. Because I was a constant reminder of the fact that he used to be married to this woman, and she humiliated him by running off with some other man. My parents were big on stuff like their reputation, and how people perceive them, which was a major part of the reason why, in spite of the fact that they never liked me, they decided to keep custody of me and made sure that I was always presentable and never spoke of the way I was treated at home in public. So even though I have been brought up pretty comfortably, my life has been miserable because of my parents, and on top of that, I could never even talk about it to anybody because I was scared of what would happen if they ever found out. However, recently, I had to speak up because of how my father kicked me out of the house. I'm 17 right now, but I'm turning 18 in 3 months, so my father thought that it would be the appropriate time to kick me out. He decided to get remarried since almost more than half a year had passed since the divorce was finalized. I knew that he had been dating his secretary, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing that if I had started around the time that my mother had filed for a divorce, my father probably thought that there were no obstacles in the way now. But they kept it private until the reverse was finalized, and a few weeks after that, they decided to announce on social media that they were together. And then, 3 months ago, they got engaged, and just about 2 weeks back, they got married. I was there at all of the ceremonies, but it was only an obligation. My dad didn't actually want me there, and it had been made very clear to me that all I had to do was smile, for them, and talk about how happy I was that my father had decided to move on in life. So I did exactly that, but in spite of it, they decided to label me as a reminder of my father's mistakes in the past and told me that I had to move out and fend for myself now. The two of them decided to have a meeting with me a few days after the wedding and told me that now that they were married, they did not want me living with them anymore because they wanted to start everything all over again. My dad, especially, did not want me lurking around, and since I was already turning 18 in a couple of months and was supposed to start college, it would be better for me to move out now. I had always known that no matter how much money he had, it wasn't going to make a difference for me because he had always made it very clear to me that after I turned 18, I was on my own. So I always knew that I would have to pay my own way through college, but it doesn't even commence until a couple of months. And I had no idea where I was going to find any sort of accommodation or how I was even going to afford it until college finally started. Besides, even though I had been accepted into a couple of places, I would need money to secure my spot, and the problem was that even if I wanted to take out a student loan, I needed consenting adults to help me out with it. I did not have any savings of my own because even though I had known that I would have to live life on my own after I turned 18, I had been forbidden to work by my parents because they thought that people would question it if they saw me, since my parents were pretty well off financially and my decision to work would be a questionable one in that case. So out of fear that people would find out about the situation at home, about how they treated me, my parents decided to tell me that I was not allowed to work, which is why I was at a dead end right now. I even tried to bring this up with my dad and my stepmom so they would be at least a little sympathetic towards me, and I told them that I couldn't exactly move out because I had nowhere to go, and I didn't even have any money of my own, but they chose to be quite nasty about it and told me that it was my problem now. I had until the end of the week, but after that, they would expect me to pack my stuff and be gone. I tried everything, from reasoning with them to fighting with them, but nothing seemed to work. So I ended up having a total breakdown in the living room, but even then, they did not seem to care. They just went about their own business and completely ignored me, and I realized that I had no other way left. I had to speak to people and stop being scared of the consequences. Without putting much thought into it, I decided to pack a couple of things up and went to my grandparents' house. My mom's parents passed away when I was very young, so my dad's parents are the only grandparents I have ever known. So far, they had absolutely no idea that I was being treated so badly at home. My parents had drilled it into my head that if I ever spoke up about the fact that they ignored me at home and tried to make it into a bigger deal than it was, they would make sure that I would pay the consequences for it. And they were not joking. I knew that I had always kept my mouth shut, and my grandparents had no idea until that day when I went to them and I told them everything. I told them that my father expected me to find a place to live and sort out my life on my own in just a week, but that was not going to be possible and I really needed them to help me out right now. I honestly didn't think that they were going to be helpful, since they were actually pretty similar to my dad. They also put a lot of thought into appearances and stuff, and I'm guessing that was something that my dad had inherited. What he hadn't considered was the fact that my grandparents were also not as shallow as him, and if they put up a show of being quite dignified and classy, it was because they were. So when I told him everything, they were outraged and told me that they would take care of me and I didn't need to worry and make myself anxious about the future because I have had enough of that for a lifetime, judging by whatever I had told them. I have been living with them since then and they have retrieved all my stuff from the house, but that's not where it has ended. My grandpa has actually fired my dad from the company and now, my dad will have to give up everything, from the company house to the car. My grandpa runs our family business that his grandfather had started and has been in our family for ages, so naturally, my father had also joined him, and in a couple of years, my grandpa was going to retire, and my father was going to take over. Now, it seems unlikely because my grandfather has decided to let him go quite unceremoniously. My dad is threatening to sue him, but my grandpa isn't scared in the slightest because the lawyers are sharks and even my dad knows it. Besides, from what I've been hearing, my grandpa actually has cause to fire him, so it can't just be a wrongful termination suit, and if my dad decides to go ahead, it will definitely end up in a loss for him. Apparently, my dad is not very good at the business part, from what my grandfather has told me, and that's a big part of the reason why my grandfather is not scared of the lawsuit, because even firing my father, he had done it on the grounds that he is not competent enough. Of course, that was the official reason. The unofficial reason was that I had told him everything, and now that he knew how I had been treated, he wanted nothing to do with the son anymore. It didn't even matter that my father was his only child. He literally told me that he would rather not have the business being handed over to my father after what he has found out, and is considering letting somebody else take over our family business when he retires. The only reason he had given my father so many chances to learn the ropes of the business and had always retained him in a higher position, even though he was not really capable of the job he was there for, was because my grandfather wanted to keep the business in the family. But now, he believed that it would be for the best if he gave somebody else a chance because his son was clearly not worthy of it. My grandparents have also been exceptionally kind to me since I showed up at their house and told me that if I had ever spoken to them about this, they would have made sure that I was taken away from my parents right that instant and placed in their custody and care instead. I wish I would have known that, but I was just really scared of how my parents would react, and they understand that, so we are just trying to undo all the damage that my parents have done. So far, it's been pretty great for me because my grandparents have told me that they're going to take care of all my expenses and I don't need to worry about anything. It's pretty relieving because now, I don't even have to think about how I'm going to pay for college. I can just have fun and live my life on my own terms instead of constantly being anxious about my father. I thought that now that I've left my father's house, my grandpa and my father could fight it out in court, and I wouldn't have to be involved, but I guess my dad is bent on dragging me into this mess and making me feel guilty or something because he hasn't stopped texting me since the last 2 days. I guess he is struggling to cope with the fact that I finally told my grandpa, and now, he is going to have to face the consequences of everything that he has put me through in the past. Well, not just him, but also my mother, but since she's not directly involved right now, it's gonna be he who has to pay. Besides, it was not my mom who decided to kick me out because she got remarried again, she left. My father was the one who decided that the house did not have any space for me anymore, even though the house that he lives in was thanks to the kindness of his own father, since it's company accommodation, and even though he never deserved it, he got the job and managed to keep it because of my grandfather. But now, he has been messaging me from several accounts, telling me that what I have done is massively messed up and that he thinks that I'm vindictive and cruel. He thinks that it was really petty of me to go and talk to my grandfather about whatever he had said because he hadn't even done anything wrong. The only reason he had wanted me out of the house was because I was turning 18 in a couple of months and I should have been looking out for myself at this age anyway. He tried to seriously downplay exactly how badly I had been treated in my childhood, by saying that lots of kids don't get the necessary kind of love and affection from their parents and they don't make a big deal out of it like I am. My grandpa had accused him of neglecting me and he decided to tell me that I wasn't neglected, I was just acting like a brat because my father had refused to support me all his life. That was a blatant lie because I definitely was neglected, maybe not in the conventional sense of the word since I always had food to eat, clothes to wear, and stuff like that, but I literally cannot even remember one instance of my parents sitting with me, trying to talk to me, going on family trips and stuff. I was always just ignored, and even on a few occasions we did take vacations together. The three of us lived in separate rooms and it was mostly just for photos that we would get together, but after that, it was back to our unhappy family life. So I definitely think I was neglected, and initially, I was just ignoring all the messages that my dad was sending me, but then, he sent me one message blaming me for everything that was happening to him because apparently, not only was he losing the house, my grandmother had decided to buy that very property from the company and transfer it to my name. So I would be getting that house, and not just that, but my father would also be losing his inheritance to me. He told me that it was all my fault, and I feel kind of weird that I'm gonna be getting everything that he's losing. Will I be the a-hole if I decided to go ahead and accept the house and inheritance that my father was supposed to get? Update 1. Hey, everyone. So it's been 2 weeks since I left my dad's house, and well, he's in the process of being evicted right now. Also, guys, I didn't know that this was not a widespread practice, but yeah, my grandfather's company is a finance company and it offers accommodation as a part of the compensation package for employees in higher positions, like my dad, my grandfather and a couple of other people. I didn't know it was that common, but anyway, a lot of people had been asking why my dad was going to lose his home and why was he living on company property anyway if it hadn't required him to relocate or anything. The cost of housing in our state is pretty high, which is why my grandfather offers accommodation, but anyway, that's not the point. So my grandmother is already in the process of buying the house and my dad has been served with an eviction notice, so he needs to find someplace to live within 4 weeks and then, he has to be gone. At least he gets 4 weeks to find a place for himself. He had given me just 1 week. I think we are being far more lenient to him than he was to me, and thanks to the comments here, I'm no longer blaming myself for whatever he's going through. I think he totally deserves it, and I have started to block all the accounts that he had been texting me from. I hadn't been doing that earlier because I thought that if I blocked him, he would just create a new account to text me and get under my skin, but well, he can do that if he wants to. I just want him to know that I don't care. Living with my grandparents has been really nice. They are indeed like my father in some respects. He used to be pretty big on punctuality and stuff and table manners, and so are my grandparents because they like maintaining appearances, but they are so much better than him that I actually feel like I'm living with a genuinely good family right now. Most importantly, they actually seem to care for me and speak to me more than my parents ever bothered to. It's a nice change of pace and I could get used to this, but I'm trying not to because in a couple of months, I'm gonna have to leave for college. However, until then, this is where I'm gonna stay. Now that all of this is out of the way, I would like to address some things and comments that have been made on my original post because it's concerning. A lot of people on the original post called me a doormat and said that I was spineless for never standing up for myself. I would just like to remind people that I'm a couple of months away from turning 18 right now, which is still actually pretty young. For 18 years of my life, I have been conditioned by my parents to believe that if I stand up for myself or if I make a big deal out of the fact that I have always been emotionally neglected, they are going to make me pay the consequences of it. They had made sure that they did everything in their power to intimidate me into keeping quiet, and I was just a kid, I couldn't have done anything. So it's not a matter of being spineless or not, it's just that I was very young and it was their job to protect me and not treat me like that and scare me into keeping my mouth shut. To the people who were questioning how brave I was, it shouldn't have been my duty to be brave in the first place, it should have been their duty to make sure I was protected and felt safe. But I was terrified of them, and you guys don't even know how much it took for me to stand up to them one time and talk to my grandparents about whatever I was going through. It's not like I had never tried. When I was 11 years old, I had a bit of an outburst at a family gathering about something that had happened at home, probably them just not giving me enough attention, and they took me home immediately and grounded me for a month. I was not allowed to interact with them even at meal times, and pretended like I didn't even exist, which was obviously not easy for an 11-year-old to deal with. I had to spend 1 whole month alone in my room because this incident had happened over winter break and I couldn't even go to school to meet my friends. It was a horrible time for me, and I learned my lesson after that, to never speak up about what happens at home in public. After something like that, I was obviously too scared to speak up, and I don't think it's fair for people to be accusing me of being spineless or being a doormat or whatever. Anyway, even if I took a stand for myself a little too late, at least I did so, and I'm proud of myself for that. Old habits die hard, we all know that. And it's going to take me a lot of time and energy to actively undo all the damage that my parents have done. I guess that's why I was even questioning the fact that it would be the right thing to accept everything that was supposed to go to my dad, but now would be given to me. But I know that I deserve this, and I'm not gonna shy away from talking about my experience anymore. Update 2. Hi, everyone. So it has been a pretty eventful week since I last posted, and my dad has finally started the wrongful termination lawsuit proceedings against my grandpa, but like I said, none of my grandparents are worried. In fact, they don't even seem to care about what's going on. I was a little worried because I did not want them to be facing any sort of losses, be it financially or reputation-wise, because of my father's actions, but they reassured me that whatever happens, they are well equipped for it. They have a team of lawyers specifically to deal with stuff like this, and they're gonna have this claim squashed within weeks, if not days. So that made me feel slightly better, and ever since I started blocking all the accounts that my dad was making to disturb me, even he had stopped trying to get in touch with me and guilt tripping because I guess he realized that it was not going to help. I also made my grandparents read all the messages that he had sent me so far, and they made me send them to the team of lawyers as proof. I don't know exactly what it was going to prove, but I did whatever they asked because I want to be of help them in any way that I can, since I still do feel kind of bad that all of this mess has been created because of me, in a way. And because of this lawsuit, my grandmother and my grandfather's company have also had to put the process of selling the house that my dad has been living in on hold because it's a disputed property right now. So I guess if not anything, at least my dad has been successful in pushing back the date of his eviction. But if I have luck on my side, he's not going to be able to push it for much longer. I really do think that I have luck on my side because my grandparents have been encouraging me to speak up about my experience living with my parents, and right now, pretty much all of the family is aware of how my parents have been treating me when I used to be living with them, and all of them have cut my father off. They think that this is the right thing to do because so far, my father had always been pushing me to keep my mouth shut so that he would be able to maintain an appearance of being very sophisticated and well brought up, but in reality, that's not the case at all. And this would be the biggest loss for him, the loss of his reputation amongst his family, and I think that's the way to go. So he has already been ostracized by his family, and when word of his legal battle with his father because of his termination gets out, he's probably going to be shunned by his friends as well because they seem like the type that would do that. I might be wrong, but I'm really hoping that I'm right. Update 3, hi, so it's been a couple of days since the proceedings started, and I guess things are not going too well for my father in court because today, he showed up at my parents' house to speak to them in person, without any lawyers. To be honest, I'm not surprised, and neither should he be because according to my grandfather, he did definitely have a reason to fire my dad officially. Anyway, I was the one who actually opened the door to him and let him in, but he didn't even acknowledge my existence. He waited for my grandparents to enter the room, and only then he started speaking, and he told them that he was ready to come to a settlement out of court if they would be willing to do that, but my grandpa shut it down instantly. My grandpa told him that right now, he was not in a position to be making demands, and he was the one who had started this fight. My grandpa was perfectly happy to just let him go without making a big deal out of it. Nobody would even have to find out why he was getting fired, but now, since he had started the fight, he had to see it through, and my grandpa was not willing to settle. He made that very clear to my father, even though my father kept insisting that none of this was his fault. He had just felt very insulted by the way he had been treated and had made a decision in the heat of the moment, but now that he was losing, he was ready to let it go. After the discussion got a little heated, he decided to turn to me and pointed at me and said that if they needed somebody to blame, it should be me. Which was just bizarre because I don't think I have any fault in this, but anyway, I didn't even react. I just walked away from the situation and went back to my room because I didn't think that it was necessary for me to even interact with him. He was not even worth my attention, and that was what I needed to show him. So I went back to my room, and a couple of minutes later, I heard the sound of shouting, and then the door slamming shut. Then, my grandparents came to my room and told me that I did the right thing by not responding to him because that just would have instigated him even more against me. My dad had apparently called me disrespectful and bratty before leaving my grandparents. They were going to fail me just the way they had failed him, which is a huge claim to make because the only reason he had a job and a house, and a secure future for so long was because of my grandparents. Apparently, he had been irresponsible and a bit of a party animal, and when he was young, which is when he met my mother and gotten married to her eventually. He hadn't even started working in my grandfather's company until 8 years ago, since he wanted to strike out on his own, and all his failed business ventures had also been funded by my grandfather. Basically, my grandfather had given him everything that he had asked for, and in spite of that, he was still so ungrateful. After his last failed business, my grandfather decided to give him an ultimatum and hire him in his own company so he could keep an eye on him and train him in the ways of our business so he would be able to run it after my grandfather retired. For 8 years, he had waited for my dad to get to the level he had expected him to, and for 8 years, my dad had continuously disappointed him, and now, whatever was happening, had been a long time coming. I had just been a catalyst, and I don't think my dad understands or is ready to accept that he is at fault here. Anyway, he's gonna have to duke it out with my grandfather in court now because his attempt to come to a settlement out of court was a bust because of his own behavior. And he can do his worst, for all I care. Update 4, hi, so it has been a couple of months and I'm starting college next week. I didn't even realize how quickly the weeks went by, but anyway, here's an update for everything that has happened in the last couple of months. First things first, my grandfather obviously won that case and my dad walked away with pretty much nothing. I think my dad just gave up and let it all go. It might have also had something to do with the fact that his secretary turned wife had filed for divorce, which is not a surprise because everyone knew she was a total digger, but I hadn't expected it to end so fast. Anyway, the bottom line was that my dad gave up trying and let it go. After that, we did not hear from him, and I think that's a good thing. However, my grandpa heard from a couple of other relatives that he had moved into an apartment in the suburbs. My guess is that he'll probably try to start something of his own, and I wish him all the best, I really do. Things have been great with my grandparents and I've really enjoyed living with them, but now, it's time for me to move to college soon enough, and I'm pretty excited for that as well. For the first time in my life, I'm gonna be living on my own without any restrictions, apart from the ones that my college decides, but anyway, it's still gonna be better than living with my parents. I'm looking forward to this and I'm keeping my fingers crossed.